Hello and welcome to a review of a 3D artist portfolio. Today we're going to be helping out my friend Rukus, who's a friend of the channel and who sent me over his resume as well as his portfolio as an environmental artist junior position, basically. Now, I am not an environment artist, so this is not my profession, but I've helped a lot of my students in the past few years get placed into very competitive positions in the games industry. And I have taken the time, very grateful for a coworker of mine at id Software who took an hour out of his day to review this portfolio with me, explain his thoughts as an expert in the field, explaining where Rukus's portfolio really shines and where it falls short of the mark. And so that's what we'll be going through today. I took very detailed notes of everything he shared with me. We're going to be looking through all those notes. And basically, it's going to be kind of a free-form video as we go through. Different things are going to pop up along the way. We're going to be reviewing this portfolio as that happens. Now, if you're a 3D environment artist who is watching this video, you might also appreciate this previous video I made called 3D Environment Artist Portfolio Review. It's basically the same thing, but in that case, I helped another person, Kelly, with her portfolio preparation. So that's an hour of content as well if you want to look at all the details and see the specific work that she's done and the stuff I talk about there. I think that would also be a really great learning resource for you if you're interested in this video. You might like that one too. So let's start with the resume. And I think Rukus's resume is actually very beautiful. But it's kind of funny when I talked to the expert. Maybe I don't think I'm going to use his name, but I'll just say Edward. When I talked to Edward, the expert, he told me that when he reviews portfolios, he actually doesn't even look at the resume. He says, you know, I just go straight to the art. I look at the art and I know pretty much instantly whether or not this is going to be somebody who we're going to be willing to send the test to. And it would just so happen that Rukus's portfolio, this is his personal website, the link he had sent me was broken at the time that I had set up this interview with Edward. And Edward said, but I was able to find Rukus's ArtStation by Googling his name. So that's always good that, you know, he showed up in the Google results. And we just used this to kind of look at his work. And Edward had shared with me, he actually hates, well, maybe hate is a strong word. He said he really dislikes when people send him like their own portfolio on their own website. He says if you do your own website, you're kind of showing that you don't know what you're doing because all the pros just use ArtStation. And of course, I didn't know this because I'm a gameplay engineer, so we don't use ArtStation at all in my field. But when it comes to 3D art designers, apparently you look a little foolish if you're not just using ArtStation. So ArtStation's where you should be putting all your work. That's where you're going to be sending the link to people. So you can more or less delete the portfolio, it sounds like. I mean, obviously, you know, if you think you have a nice portfolio and stuff, and we'll review it later, we could talk about it. But he was like, you know, don't care about it. I just want to go to this guy's ArtStation. I want to see the work. And that's sort of the wonderful thing about this discipline. It's very much, you know, kind of show your knowledge. Whereas I think for gameplay engineer, they're going to be, you know, this industry, I mean, this job too, it'll give you a test. But with this one, what's kind of cool about it is, you know, you kind of bring all your work up front and they can immediately see looking at your work whether or not you're going to make the cut. Whereas with programming, I think there's a lot more of an evaluation where you got to figure out whether or not this guy really knows his stuff. Okay, so here is Rukus's portfolio, but let's just finish up the resume here. So again, basically Edward said he doesn't even read the resume, but I'll read it for you just to give you some feedback. I love the colors. I think the font looks a little bit too cartoony, but maybe and I think that's kind of the main issue that we're going against here, right? Is that, you know, the portfolio and stuff, spoiler alert, right? It's leaning very junior. And so we want to pursue kind of, you know, okay, we're actually very serious. We're very professional. So maybe a more serious font could help. But then again, right, it's like when we're getting down to the font you're choosing, it's like who really gives a shit, right? It's the work at the end of the day. But I'm just mentioning it because every little thing could help, you know. And there's a lot of nitpicks that Edward provided, and I'll address those nitpicks just because I figure, you know, if it comes to someone's attention, it's probably worth mentioning. So he says, I'm a passionate developer who's interested in creating video games. Yeah, you could delete that, right? That's obvious. You're applying for the job. I have years of experience working with industry standard applications such as 3ds Max and Substance Painter. I specialize in realism, creating realistic environments and sceneries. However, I can adapt to a more stylish look as well. Again, I think that's all going to be evident in your portfolio. So this paragraph is of no use, right? It's providing no substance. You've used 3ds Max and Substance Painter? Yeah, evidently, right? It's written down here. So it's redundant. Cut it. It's a waste of my time to read it. I am self-motivated and have excellent organizational and planning skills. Yeah, I mean, I think that's okay, but honestly, this about me is useless. I would cut the whole thing. It's provided, no new information, let's say. So he speaks fluent English. I think that's great to know, especially because you're, a candidate who's not maybe from an English-speaking country, I think. I think he's from a European country. And what does it say here? Unity, excellent. Substance Painter, great. Maya, great. Photoshop, excellent. 3ds Max, excellent. I always think it's a little bit silly when people do these bullet points on whether or not they're proficient in Microsoft Word or something like that. I think it's good to know you have some experience with this stuff. Honestly, though, this is probably more of a red flag than a green flag, if such a thing exists, because they probably want to know that you have experience in Unreal Engine 4. It seems that this guy's portfolio is actually super heavily leaning into Unity. And the truth is, if you want to get into AAA game dev, it's a lot more like UE4 than it is like Unity. So I don't think this is great to include. I think that, if anything, you should probably try and just show the products or projects that you've worked on and then explain the relevant tools you use there, right? I'm way more a fan of that. I'm going to show you my resume. My resume is not perfect, but just for an example, what I've done here is I've said, I worked on Raven Software on this game and the engine was a custom engine. So rather than say, oh, I'm good at C++ because I say so, believe me. I say, here's a project I completed with C++, and now I know C++ because I created something out of it, right? Even for my indie game, they want to know, you want to tell them that you did Unity? Well, hey, here's a game that I made, and I designed it in Unity. So now you know that I do Unity because I have a product to show for it, right? I always recommend doing that kind of show, don't tell kind of thing. And just include it in the blurb, right? So if you did an AR developer internship, right, this sucks, right? That this really is not good because it's not explaining what technology you used. So if you were a Unity AR developer, you should put that in the line so they immediately know, oh, he has experience, professional experience doing Unity. And then you don't need to write down that you're excellent at Unity, because they already know you have that experience, right? And then they could be the judge of whether or not you're excellent or great or wonderful or whatever you want to say about yourself, right? You should just put those things into the line item itself. Okay, so that's what I think about the resume thing. So really, this whole top half of the right-hand side, I would say cut it. I think it's useless. The phone number, I would say cut it as well. I think the email is probably just best to keep the email. The LinkedIn is good, but I think it's a little bit silly to shorten the URL like this. Maybe you could get a vanity URL if you really care, but I want something I could just click. And that's something that kind of pisses me off about this PDF is it's like, and I notice this a lot with resumes, so it's not like it's just Rukus here, but a lot of times people will they'll have a resume with stuff that's a project that's online and they won't link it. It's the strangest thing. So this is literally, it looks like you've taken part of a hyperlink here. You should just hyperlink it so I could click it, right? Actually, I can't even edit this. I think it's a PDF or something. So I guess I'm going to have to type in each one of these characters like an idiot into my URL here, right? That's ridiculous. It should just be a hyperlink. Same thing with the website, right? Just make it blue, put an underline, and when I click it, it should bring me there. So you do the same thing here with the skills that you did over here with the software, right? It's this sort of arbitrary, oh, I'm good at sculpting. Oh, I'm great at post-processing. It's just I just think it's silly. I think that if you are great at UV mapping, then we're going to see that in your portfolio, right? So just listen the work experience and say, hey, I have UV mapping experience on this project. I think that's always a better way to go than to add these blurbs. Really, these blurbs are just to kind of fill in the gaps, to explain stuff that's not showing up on your experience that you want them to know. For example, this guy has something really incredible about him. He knows how to program. And that is really special as an environment artist, because it's not too common for somebody who's an artist to also have some programming chops as well. So that's kind of hidden down here. But I think that is kind of one of the few things that should be here, because it is actually representing unique information, right? This idea that, oh, an environment artist knows 3D modeling, well, no shit, right? That's their whole job, right? That's like a programmer saying, hey, I'm excellent at programming, right? It's just a total waste of time. So I'd say cut it. It's a waste of time. And then put something interesting here, like, oh, I know programming also. That's actually new information that's worth highlighting. And then you've got some interests here about hiking, camping, learning. I think learning's a little bit too general. Movies and music, again, you know, who doesn't listen to music these days? I think it might be good to explain, you know, are you really into 90s R&B? That might be, you know, a little bit more specific to be curious for someone, right? And then video games, again, that's just a little silly, right? You're applying to be a video game developer. Of course you have an interest in video games. It's just silly to say that. You know, it's a waste of time, right? If anything on your resume is like, oh, that's obvious, right? Then just cut it, right? It's a total waste of time. The resume needs to be as concise as possible. And what we have here is a resume that's a one-pager, and it doesn't have a lot of text on it, but more than half of the text on this resume is useless information. So, you know, when people read stuff and it's useless, they get pissed off because they feel like you're wasting their time. So I would say just cut it. You know, if your resume is half a page, someone might be delighted because they'll say, oh, wow, this guy, he doesn't have a lot to say because the work speaks for itself. And this is pretty glaring, right? But why is your ArtStation not linked on the portfolio? I mean, the resume here. Well, I guess your website's linked here, so that's good. And it probably is your new, yeah, make sure it's your new website linked here and not the broken one. But based on what this guy said, when I talked to the expert Edward, he basically said people only want to do ArtStation. So I would say just link them to ArtStation and let's jump there immediately. So that basically wraps it up. Those are all my thoughts on the, oh, let me lower my audio here. Sorry, you might need to increase the sound, but I realize I'm clipping a little bit. So that is all the notes that I have on your resume. Overall, I think it looks very beautiful, but I think it's lacking in the content. So I think we just need to cut stuff and just limit it to the most important and pertinent details. And I think that would that'd be a great improvement. So we're going to talk about the art itself at the end. Obviously, the art's all that matters. So I'm just getting this kind of more like side stuff out of the way first. But let's just talk about the portfolio. I think that this website is not good. I think that a lot of these rectangles, I was so confused as a graphic designer or somebody who, you know, is trying to understand the graphic design here. I really did not understand what these boxes were. I thought they were buttons. I'm so familiar with the box being a button like this, but this is not actually a button. This box is a bullet point. And I think if it's a bullet point, it should be a bullet point, not a box. I think it's very, very strange the way that you've laid this out. It's disorienting. And this summary thing, it almost feels like this should be at the top and in the middle, and then these should kind of be off to the side somewhere or something like that. And again, I'd say whenever possible, no matter what your discipline is, avoid doing bullet points. It's always better to include your projects and explain the relevant work that you did with respect to those projects. You know, you should never be asking someone to take your word for it that you have experience in lighting. You should list the experience. Okay. Hello, my name is Rukus. I'm a passionate self-taught developer who's interested in creating video games. I'm primarily interested in creating game dev environments and sceneries. I love telling stories with the help of in-game visuals and conveying emotions through immersive atmosphere. This is awesome. This is a really good summary. I think I already deleted it, but this should go on your resume instead of whatever you currently have. This is way better written because it's telling me what you're interested in within game dev. You're saying you're specifically into environmental storytelling and immersive atmosphere development, which is specific, and that's not like not everybody's going to be into that. So it's good that you're specifically calling that out. I have years of experience working with industry standard applications such as 3ds Max and Substance Painter. I specialize in realism, creating realistic environments and sceneries. However, I can adapt to a more stylish look as well. Okay. And his testimonials. So this guy, Lars, he looks pretty professional. He's a director of a studio named Studio X. I'm not familiar with that studio. He says, Rukas did an internship with Studio X over 6 months. This showed Rukas is highly motivated and driven person. Is this a quote? Oh, it is. Sorry, this is so small. It looks like an asterisk on my computer. Maybe you should bump up the font or something. But it actually looks like an asterisk, but it's actually a quote thing. So he's highly motivated and driven. He knows what he's doing, and he's constantly working to make parts smart and more efficient. During his work, he communicates well about what he's doing, and he's a great guy. All right, cool. I like it. I like that you included this testimonial. Honestly, it seems, it's to be totally honest with you, Rukas, it's a little weird. I've never seen something like this on a student's portfolio, but whatever. I know they do it on LinkedIn. So maybe ask this guy to give you a LinkedIn recommendation, but I don't know. It's a little weird, to be honest, but that's okay. We could be weird. So here are the projects. So we're going to talk about the projects. I'm really excited to get to that because that's pretty much all Edward talked about. And then I didn't even know this, but you're a programmer as well. That is so cool. So I saw your programmer portfolio. I think the website is equally not good looking. I think you should probably just find a way to squeeze this into the other thing. I don't know why you have two portfolios. I have to say the number one issue I run into with students when they're preparing their resumes, they send me a resume and it says, I am, and then they say they're two different things that are like totally unrelated. Like, honestly, this is the number one mistake I see students make. They'll say something like, I'm a sound designer and a visual effects artist, you know? And it's like, okay, those are two very different specializations within game development. Right? Sound and particle effects, totally different. So when a student brings that to me, it's usually like, okay, you've got to choose one, right? Because you can't apply to a job as both of these things, right? Unless you're at an indie studio where basically everybody's doing everything. AAA studios, they want you to specialize. And so that specialization is usually what I'm spending the most time working with students and trying to figure out what are they strongest at and what do they want to dive deep into. And it seems that you're really passionate about the environment art. So I'd say, why is this here? You know, who cares? Do you want to be a gameplay developer or a programmer? Maybe you do. Maybe there's a way to fit this in there. I'm not sure, but I would reconsider, how to present this because it seems like you've got two portfolios right now. If you click this, it's like, oh, okay. So he should make up his mind. Is it this or this? Because they look, it's clear you kind of did the same thing, but in a different color, right? So it doesn't really feel like one of these is to support the other one, which makes people think, oh, he doesn't know what he wants to do. You should probably pick one to be, okay, no, this is what I'm about. And then here's a little subsection that tells you about my programming experience. By the way, this is kind of cool how you did these hashtags to explain your experience with these projects. I think that's great. It's clear you have a lot of experience with Unity. You must know, though, for a lot of the AAA game dev, it's going to be UE4, as in the Unreal Engine. So you might want to build up your experience there if you want to apply to a studio like, id or really any AAA studio that's not a mobile game company. Again, I'm not exactly sure if you want to do mobile games. But if you do, then Unity is totally the way to go. But if not, probably you want to build out that UE4 experience. I guess it's UE5 now. I shouldn't say UE4. And overall, I would say this is pretty unsexy, the showing the projects. I wish you had included a picture for each project. The fact that I have to click this button and then go into the detail thing, I think that's kind of lame. It would be more nice if maybe like you just had a picture and then I could click it. Like maybe this video should have just been over here, Maybe like I can click a button here that says expand and then it shows me the video and the blurb. The fact that I got to jump to, oh shoot, I closed it already. The fact that I got to jump to another page to read this information, it's just kind of annoying. And that's it, man. So that is the portfolio reviewed. We talked about the resume. Now it's time to talk about what actually matters, which is the work itself. And again, I consulted with an expert on this, Mr. Edward. So he gave me all the feedback that I'll be presenting today with respect to, the actual skill on display here in the design and art. So let's jump into it. Let me see what we have here. So I just wanted to say that it's often the case that and this is just for anybody else who's listening, their education, you know, I'm sure Ruckus already knows this, but it's all new to me. Basically, it sounds like the way that the studio works, at least at id, is you have the characters and world building artists, and then within world building you have people who might do props and organic work, and then other people who do kit work. So those are kind of the ways the distinctions go down. It's like characters and world building on top are the two main divides. And then within world building, there's props / organics, and separate thing is going to be kit work. So that's kind of the way that breaks down. Let me see, what else does this guy say? So he said, yeah, we never look at the resumes unless the ArtStation is good. If the ArtStation is good, then they'll look at the resumes. The ArtStation is basically the standard, and if you don't use ArtStation, it looks like you don't know what you're doing. He said that he's definitely intrigued by these pictures off the bat. He thought it was a pretty good display to start. And I asked him, because we looked at some other portfolios, which I'll reference later, that were sort of more senior people. And I said, you know, does it matter that he only has 5 pictures here? I think in the other example with Kelly, she only had like 4. And he said, no, that's totally fine. What we look for is the quality of the work. We want to see a junior person who's really spent time getting stuff to show the full extent of their skills, rather than going for a quantity, right? They really want to see high quality. So that's all really great information to know. So this is totally a good amount of work, it sounds like. So right now it's just to determine, you know, what's the quality look like. And he said you did a good job in picking out some of these thumbnails. He thought they were intriguing. He said immediately the one that caught his attention was the City Walk. He knew he wanted to go there first. But he thought, you know, maybe I'll go in the left to right. But then I think we decided to just jump into the City Walk scene. So this is the City Walk scene, and this is Ruckus's best piece. This is the best work that he has to show. I based on the opinion of the expert Edward. So we're gonna talk about it, and let me see what he says. So let me just scroll through it really quick. So here's sort of the final composition. Then here's I think this is called the UV of the lamp. Here's kind of the same thing, but again, I think here's a street light. Another street light, the same street light, the same street light. Here's a whole bunch of props kind of hanging out. And then here's, I think it's called the UVs for these street lights. Excuse me if I'm getting the name wrong on that. But that's it, basically. That's the whole explanation here. And of course, he had some text here. So let's see what he said. So he says, I'm only seeing a bunch of zoomed in props. So I'm trying to determine which props they made. And this was something that I could tell pissed this guy off, is that he sees there's a bunch of props here, right? And you'll notice some stuff is missing here. Namely, there is no car. And then when we go up to this composition, you'll see that there is a car. And it's like one of the most prominent pieces in this piece of art, actually, is this car right here. And so that definitely, he did not like that. He basically said, you know, it's okay if you're not going to model everything. But if that's the case, then you need to explicitly state which parts were not your own work. And so in this case, it sounds like he did the street lights and some of the support stuff, but he didn't do the car. And so the reviewer really didn't like that. He said you need to call out whether or not you did the characters, and if not, you need to list your sources so that people know whether or not you did the work. What Ruckus did call out in this piece, though, are these wireframes of this lamppost. And, you know, what you want to do, right, with these hero shots, basically, is you want to highlight some of the best work you did to kind of show it off. And he was actually very concerned about this. This was kind of a red flag for the reviewer. Because what he said was, it was weird to call out the wireframe for this lamppost, because he did not actually think this lamppost was very impressive. He thought this was a relative, primitive. It was a rather primitive piece of 3D design. And so he thought that these close-ups should be removed, because having this, like, these close-ups, and I mean, there's tons of shots, like, you show the same light like 4 times, it's saying, this is really good. Like, it's saying, look at me, look at how zoomed in this is really good, this is really impressive. And the guy was saying, that's a red flag, because if this guy thinks this is impressive, this is not very impressive. So it's kind of not good that he's highlighting this to say like, oh, wow, look at this. Because it's like, it's okay, but it's really not a star. It's not even the star, I think, necessarily of this scene. So he kind of didn't like that. So he thought that was weird that you did such a close up of something that he thinks he doesn't think this is kind of a very incredible piece, basically. Let me see what else he said here. Okay. So I think we're gonna. So we're gonna talk about this lamppost a little bit more. So can I zoom in on this? I don't think I can. Let me try to pull it up over here. Okay. Yeah, I can a little bit. All right. So we're gonna zoom in on this lamppost because I just want to talk about this. Because I mean, this is the only thing you zoomed in on, right? So clearly you wanted to talk about this lamppost. Here's what this guy said. And again, we're gonna get really into specifics here, but that's just because these guys are experts, so they know what they're talking about. I honestly didn't know the difference between what we're about to talk about, but to this guy, apparently he knew right away. So what he said was, the workflow that you did to create this lamppost was a red flag. So he saw this lamppost and he knew immediately how you made it, and he wanted to explain why this was not the correct, or this was not the industry standard to make it. So apparently, the way that the professionals make their 3D art assets is they create a very high detailed model that has chunks missing, right? So for this example, we see right here that there's a chunk missing of this lamppost. The professional way to do that, apparently, is but in this model, you'll see there's no chunk missing. It's like a perfect cylinder. What he says that they do is when they're in the modeling stage, they model what's called a high-res version, right? An HD version, basically, where you will model the deformation on the lamp, right? You're going to manually take off bits and pieces and scrape it up and fuck it up, right? So that it looks like it's taken some time, taken some age, right? And then what you do is you render it through a baking process into a lower poly version, a game-ready version. But all those fine detail work that you did, that gets sucked into a bump map, or maybe it's called a height map. However, so that's the way that the pros do it. That's the correct workflow. The way that he was explaining it to me, it sounds like Rukus did like a noob workflow, where instead of rendering the high poly model, instead he only rendered the low poly model. And then he went into this substance painter or something like that, and he manually added on, painted on these imperfections. And so he said that, that works, right? That's a way that people can get art done, but that's not the AAA standard. So it's a red flag that he's doing this kind of workflow, because this is not reflective of the way that, the professionals that he's trying to hire should be doing their work. So I don't know, maybe it's easier to do it this way. I'm not really sure, but it did seem like the more official way was the way that would have shown more skill. So it sounds like they were not happy to see that in this portfolio piece. Okay, so that's everything I think I had to say there. Let's see what's next. Okay, so he says it's okay to use library props, but it needs to be explicitly stated. It's not a disqualification, but he prefers that it will be all you and all your work. The work... Okay, yeah, so that's all done. Let me see what else he said. Okay, so, yeah, we looked at some other pieces, and I think we looked at this piece as well. Let me see if he has notes on this. Let me see what we could say here. Okay. Oh, right. Let's stay on the road, because he had some more notes on the road. So when it comes to the road, what this guy is thinking, so we'll look at Rukus's other art pieces as well. But basically what the expert said is that Rukus, at this time, obviously growth mindset, but at this time, this portfolio does not reflect a level of skill or competency with modeling, basically. It's not very good, unfortunately. It's not going to make the cut. But he said that Rukus stood out as a really good environmental storyteller. So he's basically saying, you know what? This guy, his modeling skills are not there. he could not land a position in the AAA space if he wanted to be a pro modeler, basically. He's saying, these highlight pieces, they're just not at the level of quality that it's going to need to be to get hired. But he's very good at creating stories with his design and his spaces and this cool mine shaft and this other thing we'll look at in a moment. So so that's kind of the summary. I know I'm doing the conclusion now, but basically he said, I think if you want to get a job, there's a lot of options, right? And one of those options could be someone who takes existing props and makes a story out of them, right? Such as finding art assets online. And another job would be creating those art assets, right? Manually, one by one. And he's saying right now your skill level is such that you'd be a good fit for somebody who does that sort of set dressing, but not going to make the bar when it comes to, being somebody who creates the assets. So maybe you should lean into that set design, right? And so here's the expert's opinion on what you should do in order to get the perfect portfolio, right? He's saying Unity is not known for like HD sexy stuff. You should go to Unreal Engine 5, learn it, and then download great high fidelity assets from the Unreal Engine 5 marketplace. And then focus on creating awesome stories and doing shit like this in UE5, where he said if you had done this with like really nice assets, he said this was like a 6 out of 10. It could have turned into a 9 out of 10 with the right assets. So I think, there's certainly a career opportunity for you. You clearly have something special, right? You have a gift, you have some skills when it comes to creating a story with objects, but not in creating those objects. Not yet, at least, right? If you want to do that, of course, growth mindset, you could build up those skills. But he's saying right now, if you want to get the job, next week, next month, whatever, that's what you should be doing. You should be downloading really high quality assets and building out some cool scenes using those assets. A lot of them actually are free in Unreal Engine 5, so you could start doing that immediately. But apparently Unity is just not the way to go. Okay, so let's talk about some of the problems here. Because, when Edward started looking at it, he had some serious red flags as well when it came to the design here. Basically, the main issue is that this car is too big. It's huge relative to this road, okay? And this lady is huge relative to this signpost. So a lot of the scaling is like wonky in this scene, and it really threw him off. He also said it was like super crazy busy, and I think we can understand what he's saying there, right? There's a lot going on in this scene. I mean, this lamppost is like 10 feet away from this lamppost, and it's a double lamppost, right? So it's a little bit silly how much stuff is going on in the scene, right? It's really, really busy. I think if you had reduced it a lot and just tried to make your pieces shine and be the heroes of this piece, I think that could have done a lot of highlighting. But there are serious proportion and scaling issues in this set piece. I think what might help a lot is if you just took a picture from like real life and tried to replicate it. I think that might be a better place to start, because I think a lot of these proportion issues and stuff like that, you're gonna realize that when you're replicating the real life, right? It's easy when it comes into a game and suddenly, you've got a double line here and a crosswalk going right through it, right? You would never have a crosswalk going through a double line through a road, right? At least certainly not in America. And a double road usually means like a highway. So it was just, he said it was very strange to see this with this car, in this size, and this lady's size, and these lamppost size. It doesn't really come together as believable. It's very off, very strange, right? All the sizes. So those are a lot of red flags that he highlighted. Hopefully, these are all things that could be fixed, honestly, if you want to keep this piece. All right, let me see what else he said. So he said this guy, Rukus, could definitely land an art test for a junior position. But he was concerned because the art test that they sent to candidates is actually very similar to this house. Okay, there's actually a lot of similarities here. But his concern here is that he's seeing the same thing with this house that he saw with the lampposts. You know, it's designed as sort of a low poly model. And by low poly, I mean it's got perfect straight line edges and all that stuff. And then he's just doing substance painting on top of that. He's saying this guy's going to run into a lot of issues when he does our test because it's got a lot of... It's similar to this, but it's a lot more challenging. So he basically saying, you know, this does not make the cut. So how can I expect him to make the cut on a more complicated design? He said he would still send the art test because you never know. Somebody might, you know, rise to the occasion and actually knock it out and get it done. But he said that basically, you know, 9 times out of 10, he knows what the result is going to be when he gets it back. And judging off this piece alone, he said this piece and the Middle East environment are the weakest pieces of the portfolio right now. And so he said this piece really does not look good and it should be cut. But he said if you want, you might be able to combine this piece, this cool house, and maybe make it work in a 3D environment that you've made on your own. He said that could be interesting. He said he sees a lot that applicants will kind of design a little forest scene like this. He says pretty much everybody's got one. And because of that, they're not very impressive to have. So it seemed like this piece, he really didn't like it, honestly. It seemed like it didn't really connect with him. But I don't know, maybe if you... But it sounds like if you had... Oh, shit. I think I'm lost. Can I not get back? Okay. It sounds like if you had taken this house and you've made it really HD, and then you built out the environment around the house to sort of augment the house, then that could have kind of combined to make one really good piece here. So he's saying, you know, there might be a potential for you to do something like that. He noticed that you were selling this piece on the Unity Asset Store, and he said that was really impressive. So he was happy to see that. He thought that was really cool, that you were doing that. He says that's like impressive to do. And I think that's impressive too. What else did he say? So he's basically saying that the main reason why junior artists fail the test is because they are too cartoony or primitive. And that's kind of what we've been harping on a lot here. Basically, the model is like perfect, right? It's perfect straight lines. And that's what he means by cartoony. It's like if someone took a turret of a castle and they designed it as just a cylinder rather than looking like a sort of dilapidated brick edifice. That's kind of the main issue here. So he said that's the most common issue he sees with junior artists. Okay. Let me see what else we have here. So he said the fidelity of this art is not game ready. None of these pieces are at the standard that would need to be in order to ship. He says it wouldn't be enough to get you into, you know, a AAA studio like id. But obviously, there's other studios that might be more willing to take somebody on who's got a lot of skills in set dressing, right? So just because that's not the right fit for you, there might be another studio that's like a really good fit for you. So you know, and obviously, you know, there's so many amazing opportunities in this industry. That's what I love about it. It's like everybody comes at it with their own angle. So this guy clearly has a skill and a gift for telling stories and creating interesting spaces. So you could probably, as he said, find a job where it kind of leans into that, where it's like, okay, you can take existing kit assets and build a cool story out of it. So what he said was go into UE5, download some great assets, and kind of specialize down the set dressing path and create some amazing baller environmental storytelling. And he said, you know, with the skills you have on display now, he said, you know, you could probably get a job through that kind of work. All right. So now we're going to look at an example of somebody who, so he just went through ArtStation. I don't know how you do this, honestly. I'm really afraid that like some naked person's going to pop up or something. And then I'll have to like delete this video and I won't be able to post it to YouTube. But he basically like went to this thing. Oh, look, is that Doom? Or it's just a skull or something. So he went to this thing and he randomly picked a picture and he zoomed into it. And then he went to this guy's portfolio and he said, actually, this is kind of what we were looking for. So this is just a total random dude named Kenneth Tan, who he said, you know, this guy is kind of the portfolio that he would have liked to see if he wanted to do a 3D modeler. So we're going to look at this guy's portfolio as sort of an example of like what somebody who would have passed the bar looks like. So you have a reference point so that you know sort of where to build up to if you want to go down that path. And so again, I have no idea who this person is. It's just a random guy we found online. But basically, what this guy did is kind of interesting because I think this could be a really good fit for you, Ruckus. This is the initial piece that drew the eye of Edward. He saw this picture and he's like, oh shit, this is good shit right here, right? And so if you scroll down this, it's like it's a weird little thing, but it's got really high fidelity design, really beautiful work on displaying the UV maps. And he goes down here and he explains all the different texture maps and atlasing that he did here. And here's the big difference, Ruckus. You can tell he apparently did the correct method where he modeled the HD version and then he baked it down to get all these little imperfections in the bump map and stuff rather than applying it with, I think, whatever the name of that tool is, the substance painter thing. So basically he's saying this is what I was looking for. You know, this is kind of what I would have liked. Oh, and he's even got some reference images here. That's awesome. I love that. Oh, it's an egg beater. Is that what it is? It's an egg beater? Man, I would have thought this is like a weapon of something. It looks so dangerous. So that's kind of what it should look like. That's kind of what your house should look like, right? It should have all these details, and this is a really good example looking at this guy's work to kind of get a reference for that. And he has some sort of a camcorder, is that what they're called? Similar kind of thing here, very similar level of detail. I think this is an example of kind of what Edward was looking for with respect to that. But the reason why I was drawn to this guy's portfolio is because he did exactly what this guy Edward just told you to do. He said that we read in his bio here, he downloaded all these assets from the UE5 asset store, and he basically composed this scene using those free downloaded assets. Maybe he bought them, I don't know. But he used it using those assets, and it looks really good. So basically, this is what he wants you to do. You know, make those assets by downloading them to kind of get everything together. And then, you know, you make the pieces that you need to in order to fill in the gaps, kind of. And this guy does a really good job of showing his process. I think he has some really great work here. So this is a great dude to study and understand how he got there. This is also just a really pretty scene that he made. And again, he shows his work process kind of step by step. I think there's a GIF somewhere in here. Yeah, check this out, where he kind of shows how he went through the process of designing that environmental scene. So it's something similar to what you did in your YouTube video, but I think a GIF is actually a little bit more powerful in showing those layers get in. And he's showing, you know, lighting, he's doing the VFX, he's doing the post-processing. You said in your resume that you have experience doing all those things. So I think if you could set up a portfolio piece similar to this Grave of the Fireflies thing that Kenneth has, that'd be a really great way to show off your skills and, you know, land your dream job. So here's what Eduardo said, though. He said, did I change his name to Eduardo? Okay, whatever. This is what the expert said. He said, look, this is great. A guy making a scene using UE5 assets. And this is great. Making a UE5 asset on his own with high detail. But you know what's amazing? You know what would bring it all together? If he made a high fidelity scene where he had made every asset in the scene, right? So that's kind of the next level. And Kenneth doesn't even have that, right? So that's kind of where we would take this and bring it to the final form is you've got, you know, okay, I can make a model on my own. Okay, I can design a scene. Now show me a scene where you designed all the models. So that's kind of like the final step here, and it doesn't look like Kenneth has that, but you can go to that level and kind of finish up that progression there, and then you'll have basically the full set. So that's everything I had to say about that. Now, this is something he highlighted. He said it was a nitpick, but I'm going to tell you this, because if it pisses him off, maybe it annoys other people. He says he doesn't like it when junior artists in the bottom right put this little logo to say what tool they used. Apparently, a lot of artists do this to show what game it was for. So you'll see right here, it says UE Unreal Engine, and here it says Marmoset Tool Bag. Apparently, maybe we'll see it over here. when you work on like League of Legends or something, like you'll have the logo at the bottom to show what game it was. And he says that they're kind of copying like the pros by putting they're putting the logo of like UE5 down there. So he said don't do that. He basically says, it looks like kind of like a poser, I guess. So, instead just leave it off. Yeah, so I think this is probably a good example, right? Where it has like the little Call of Duty stuff. All right. So I think we talked about that. So the guy we looked at, Kenneth, was an example of what a high quality junior portfolio should look like. Now I want to show you a high quality mid-level portfolio. So this is somebody who's working at id Studio, and he's got some senior level quality work here, right? This guy, Peter. But not all of it is senior level quality, right? And he's also got some of his personal work here from the past that he's sort of integrated into this stuff. But you can definitely see the progression of this guy from kind of the work that he was doing previously with these really cool snail-looking creatures, to the kind of work that he did here. Like, holy shit, man. I don't know what the hell this is, but it looks scary. So this is somebody just you could look at as sort of a mid-level. So this is kind of what you're looking towards. And again, here's an example where they have the logo on the bottom left here. So he said, do it if it's a game, but if it's not a game, just don't do it. So I guess here's an example of someone who didn't do it. So he's saying that kind of like the skull, this is an example of like mid-level work where it was kind of quick. It's not like the level of fidelity he's looking for. This is just kind of an example of like what mid-level might look like. And then he said for senior level, you could look at this guy, Austin Klein. Let me see if I can find this guy. Austin Klein. Did it come up and I just didn't push it? There we go. All right, so this is apparently a senior. So, I mean, his stuff is very serious, very, very professional thumbnails here, I have to say. But, I mean, you look at this guy's stuff and it's like, wow, he's got his shit together, right? So this is what an expert looks like. So you can look at this as kind of like, now we've looked at a junior, we looked at a mid-level, we looked at an expert. Okay. Let me see what else. So he had some more notes here, which I'm just going to go through so that you get all the details. Let's go back to your portfolio. Okay. So he said no professional work means there. So he says when he's assessing a portfolio, the way he knows if it's a junior is if they don't have any professional work, right? Basically, they don't have any examples that were from shipped AAA games. He said 4 items is fine for a portfolio if it's a junior portfolio, and it's way better than having 16 items where some of them are crappy. He said he was happy that a portfolio is not just guns. He says he sees way too many portfolios where they're just sending him M4 guns. He said guns are not interesting to model. He doesn't want to see modeled guns because everybody does it, and it's just not interesting. So I think he was actually kind of intrigued at the kitchen work you did. You had some work that was like just kitchens, like kitchen appliances and stuff, and he was like, "Oh, that's interesting. That's kind of different." All right. So with the Lake Townhouse, he said he wanted to know if he was actually modeling the details. The building was a big letdown because it was similar to an art test, but it wasn't capturing the level of complexity that they were looking for. So he said he should just cut that one because it is very weak. Maybe he could combine it with that in the Middle East environment. Okay. He said the modern hallway is cool. This person is not a fantastic modeler. The work is at a questionable level of expertise. And there were some red flags on scaling. So there was red flags here on scaling, which we already addressed. But there was another piece. I think I lost this guy's. Yeah. Can I find it? Oh, darn. I don't know. Is there a way that I could jump to your art station from this thing? Maybe not. I think honestly, it sounds like you should just delete the portfolio and just have the art station based on what this guy said. All right. Well, anyways, you had a hallway scene. Maybe we'll see it here. I guess it's not here. But the hallway scene apparently had some questionable scaling with some doors that he didn't like. He said that in the studio that he works at, there isn't a role for someone who's just kind of like a set dresser who uses existing kits, But there are other studios that might hire that kind of person. So it's not a good fit for what he's looking for, but another hiring manager, it might be exactly what they need. He said nothing in your portfolio is so sore that it should be cut, but he said basically the lake house was the weakest scene and the Middle East environment was the weakest scene. He said that your work is very consistent in terms of skill level, which I honestly wasn't too happy to hear because it sounded like it was consistently below the bar. But I think it's basically saying like, you know, he felt like he had a really good understanding of where you're at and also with respect to where you can grow. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here for improvement. Um, Anything else he said? No, I think that's it. So he basically said that he would have went through this portfolio really fast, and he said he may have actually sent a test out just to see whether or not Rukus could have made the bar when it actually came to the exam. So it sounds like, you know, he's open to doing the test and letting people try and put the work in to see if they can make the cut. But his intuition is that right now, Rukus would not be able to make the cut with the current expertise on display, and that Rukus should focus on a set dressing position that really highlights his ability to create a great story with some environmental design and environmental storytelling. Okay, so that wraps up this review. Thank you so much for sending in your portfolio. I know it's kind of like a daunting thing to do to have somebody critique your work and to talk about stuff, especially if it's not always, with a critique, it's not always going to be positive. But I'm really grateful that you did this because I know there's a lot of people who watch this channel and who are going to benefit a lot from seeing, you know, what a 3D artist looks like when they're starting out. And, you know, if you land that dream job, if you get, you know, further in the career, I'd love to hear where you land, Rukus, and kind of seeing what that progression looks like. I'm wishing you all the best of luck, my brother. And I'm looking forward to seeing, you know, any of the games that you work on in the future to see, you know, kind of how you bring those environments to life in the next game that I play that's by you. So I think it's clear you put in a lot of work already to kind of build up your skills there. You said you're self-taught, which is incredibly impressive. And I wish you luck in the interview process and hopefully landing that dream job. Thank you so much. And don't forget to like this video if you found it helpful. Subscribe for more. And if you have any questions, please don't feel afraid to write them down in the comments section, and I will respond to them as soon as I have a moment. Thank you.